little later. Okay. Today's training is on LEED. So I just put this onto the training thing very recently, like a week and a half ago. And it came up because we had a couple people within the team asking questions about it. Ian was doing his final things on 1700 Dell and was like, oh my God, they're asking for LEED Platinum. Like, what do I need to do? Like, what do I do? Which is great. Great that he was asking the questions, but he was panicked because he didn't know how he needed to approach the project differently. And he's realizing this as he's doing the bid for him. And I think someone else, I can't remember who, I'm sorry, like a week before, same thing, was like, hey, they're looking for a certain type of LEED. Like, what is it? What do I need to do? And so this presentation is going over that. This isn't, and I'm going to tell you an older presentation. I did this for the operations group probably, I don't know, a year ago, and maybe some people from pre-construction at the time sat in on that as well. I really can't remember, but obviously we have a lot of new people since then haven't seen this. So that's what, little background on why we're doing this, to go over and really get into like what you do need to know about LEED. Okay, as I go, standard deal, anyone has any questions, feel free, just unmute and ask away. So what is LEED? So LEED stands for Leadership in Energy and Environmental Design. It is a program, a green building certification program that was developed by the U.S. Green Building Council, which is a non-profit entity with some government support, with whose goal is to create a rating system for construction to be able to determine to an extent how environmentally friendly that building is. It's really helping to help building owners and operators be more environmentally responsible with the resources that they have. You will run into today as well, not just LEED buildings, but LEED people. You'll sometimes see this on people's like email blocks that they're a LEED associate or a LEED AP. Basically, you can take classes, you can do studying to ultimately like get certification that you are an expert in lean, or not lean, LEED. So history of this, LEED now is going on almost 30 years. So originally started back in 1993 with a pilot version focused only on new construction. It launched version 2.0, which was what the major one we had for quite a long time, which launched in 2005. They launched version 3, 2009. Version 4 launched in 2013. And today, the current version is version 4.1. There have been changes to the program through each of these versions, which we'll look at a little bit, but the general flavor of them has stayed basically the same. So what different kinds of buildings does LEED version 4.1 look at? So when buildings choose to try to get LEED certification, they fall into different categories, and each one of these different categories will have different requirements. The vast majority of what we do at Walters and Wolff falls under this first one, building design and construction. So when you're building a new building, and so much of our stuff that is core and shell buildings, they fall under building design and construction. So when you get that certification, when someone says, I'm going for LEED Platinum, what they really mean is they're going for LEED Platinum under building design and construction. There is also categories for interior design and construction, which would be used more oftentimes on like renovations of buildings where the skin's not being changed, but they're changing out the inside design. There's also LEED for operations and maintenance. Let's say you had an old building that you're not redoing anything, but you still want to be able to stick LEED on it, there's a process where you can go change how you operate that building and still be able to get the credit. You're starting to sense like, sounds like you could just do whatever you want and end up getting a sticker. Kind of is. I'm pretty jaded when it comes to LEED. I mean, it really is like a pretty gimmicky thing. There's LEED residential, which focuses on houses, or also, I mean, bigger construction residential, just because residential has very different building demands than an office building, right? The amount of water that you use in residential, very different than the water that you use in an office building. Entire cities and communities can get LEED certification. And then there's a process where you can get certified and then you can get recertified. So again, 90% of what we do falls under that building design and construction. That's all new construction and major renovations, core and shell developments, schools, retail, data centers, warehouses, hospitality, healthcare, all of those go into that. So what does LEED look at? How are they coming up with the score? It's again, it's a ranking system. It's out of 100 points. So the most you can get is 100 points, which would put you at the platinum level. And we see here on this little nutritional chart, some of the, not some of, these are the different categories that it's ranking a building on. The integrative process, location and transportation, how sustainable the site itself is, the water efficiency of the building, the energy and atmosphere of the building, material resources, indoor air quality, and then finally there are some bonus points available for innovation and then regional priority. We'll look at these all in a little more detail, but as you look at these, you may think like, which one of these does Walters and Wolff like play a factor into? A lot of these don't, right? I mean, we have no say on location and transportation. That's looking at how is the building situated close to mass transit? Are you providing electric car chargers? Are you providing spots for bikes? It looks at that. Sustainable sites is what type of site was it built on? Are you destroying habitat to put up your building? Things like that. Water efficiency of the building, obviously we don't have anything to do with. Most of our involvement comes into two categories: the energy and atmosphere and the materials and resources. And our involvement is very passive. So think about if you've gone through a project, where you've been involved in that design of the energy efficiency of the building, meaning the architect has asked you questions about, hey, what is your U factor of your curtain wall? What's the solar heat gain coefficient? They need that information so that they can plug that into their thermal model. That is all coming down to be able to get points for energy and atmosphere. One of the major things that they're looking for is how energy efficient is this building? We are passive in this. The things we do don't directly contribute to it. Yes, we design our W75 to be a thermally broken efficient system, but it's really no different than any other curtain wall from that standpoint. The major things that decide it are what are the glass types that are being chosen? And that's being decided by the architect. What type of insulation are they putting at the opaque area of the buildings? Again, not us making the choice. That's more the architect. So while our curtain wall is part of that equation, we're very passive. It's not active choices that we make that drive it. Material and resources. That one's looking at what types of materials go into the building. Are you using renewable resources? We don't use renewable resources. It's metal and glass. We're not using wood. They will look at recycled content. And again, yes, we contribute. Our extruders use recycled content in their aluminum, but we're passive. I can't go to Western and say, Western, I want you to use aluminum that's 100% recycled. They won't do that. They won't even offer it. They can't get it. And it actually, when you're dealing with extrusions, you have to limit the amount of recycled content because it'll cause quality problems having too much recycled content. So we're very passive with these. Getting a little more into the rankings, different levels that you hear about. So the base level is LEED certified. That's getting 40 out of 49 points out of that possible 100, actually out of that possible 110. LEED silver gets 50 to 59, LEED gold 60 to 79, LEED platinum 80 to 110. I talked about this when we were looking at the last slide, so we'll go through these pretty quickly. Integrative processes, this was worth just 1 point. The definition that I put here on the screen, this is directly from LEED, so I didn't write this, but it's the process, opportunities to achieve synergy across disciplines and building systems. Use the analysis described below to inform the owner's project requirements, base of design, design documents, and construction documents. Basically, it's how well they did an integrative process of all the parties from the very beginning of the process, and it's just worth a point. Location and transportation, we talked about that. Bikes, electric vehicles, location to transportation. Sustainable sites, we talked about that. The water efficiency, the energy and atmosphere, materials and resources. The other one on materials and resources is location. They're looking for products that are manufactured close to the building site, but it's looking for not only be manufactured, be harvested. So this falls under the building product disclosure and optimization sourcing. Again, not something that we can really contribute to. Do we manufacture close to most of our jobs? Yes. But do we source our materials from close to the jobs? No, because they really want to take sourcing all the way to where it was originally created. So that means you need to track the aluminum. We made it in Fremont, but it got extruded in Texas. But that billet may have very well actually been mined out of the ground in Australia. So that's true source is Australia. There's very little that truly comes from local. So there's not much that we do there. Environmental indoor air quality, again, we're passive on this one. So the big one that applies to us is low emitting materials. If you've ever bought a new car and you get in that car and you smell that new car smell, you may have heard that's bad, because what you're smelling is the off-gassing of all of the adhesives and solvents, and you're probably giving yourself cancer from smelling your new car. Buildings are the same way, in that in the old days, most of the materials that were used in the buildings, they had off-gassing. Those solvents and the sealants and the paints, those odors, the reason you smell it is because that's actually chemicals coming off of those materials. So LEED says you cannot use any of those. You need to use materials that are low emitting, that are not putting off any additional gases into the atmosphere as they cure. We don't use a lot of, I like to think of this one as wet material. This is looking at products that get applied wet. Our paint, not wet, right? It comes to the job site fully dried. It was applied wet in Texas when Western put it on the extrusions, but it got cured in Texas. It's dry. Our wet materials, caulking. Caulking is the big one. And any product from Dow meets the requirements of low emitting materials. We don't need to do anything special. We just need to use Dow the way we want it. Another one here that we're passively involved with, daylight. Daylighting is about how much daylight the building brings in for occupants, so that you use natural light versus artificial light. That also goes to the quality views. We're passive. Did you decide how much daylight comes in the building? No, because it was the architect that designed what that structure was going to look like, and they chose the glass types. Same with the acoustic performance. We are passive on that. Innovation, coming up with innovative ways to do the building, anything special, they can get extra points. And then some regional priority. These are special points based upon special requirements in that area. So for example, a building going up in Las Vegas may get points for more effectively dealing with rainwater management compared to some place like Seattle, where they have an abundance of water. So it's looking at what's important for the areas. I'm going to get into like the ones that are specifically about Walters and Wolf, but I'm going to go quick because here's basically the end goal that or the end thing I want you to take away from this. When you have a project that is going for LEED, whether that's LEED certified or LEED platinum, what do you need to do differently as estimator or pre-construction? Absolutely nothing. There's nothing you need to do differently. There's nothing you could do differently. Unless someone is specifically asking you to do something, like they're saying, hey, I need you to have a certain amount of recycled content, which doesn't happen. But unless someone's asking something like that, there's nothing you need to do. The fact that a job is going LEED platinum doesn't change how we price or do that job. There is work that the PM is going to do, just in terms of submitting documentation for some of these items that we are passively supporting, but that's the extent of it. So the operations side of Walters and Wolf needs to have a better understanding, just so they know what documents they need to submit. In terms of us upfront being at the source, there isn't anything you need to do. So again, going over some of these quickly, the sourcing, they're looking for materials to come from areas within 500 miles of the job site. Cement is a big one, where and precast supports this a lot, and they'll have to show documentation of where all of their aggregates for the precast came from. And if they came within 500 miles, that can count towards it. Ours don't. So we're generally on the glass side submitting documentation saying that there isn't much that we can do here because we're not within 500 miles. We will submit documentation on our recycled content. So we have standard letters from Western that state what the recycled content of their billet is, and our PMs submit that along with what the value of our aluminum is. And that's the value from our G703, which is our billing. So our fully marked up value of the aluminum. We submit that so they have that. We submit the documents for low emitting materials. There are data sheets from Dow that specifically state what the VOCs are. Those are volatile organic compounds, and they submit that to the customer. So that's the extent of what we have here. Now, that's the end of my slideshow, because that's all that there is on LEED. Because, again, there's nothing we need to do differently. What I want to talk about here a little bit of it is some of the future things that are changing and some of the other initiatives that are coming out in this realm. LEED is becoming a little less popular because it is recognized as a gimmick. It is just a gimmick. And think about some of the things we talked about here. Like, think about the low emitting materials. So they give credit to a building that at that building site, you don't use materials that emit volatile organic compounds. But where did you look at the factories that produce those materials, right? Western is painting the material in Texas. Are they emitting a lot of dangerous chemicals into the air? Who knows? No one's asking about it. And so this has been a big complaint about LEED, is that it's too focused on the physical building itself and just a couple metrics, and not about that long-term, how much is in it. The word that's becoming really popular today and that a lot of architects are trying to learn about is embodied carbon. So the concept of embodied carbon is how much carbon, and let's just use the word carbon as a bad thing. I mean, it's pollutants, it's everything. is embodied in that material from its whole manufacturing process. You hear about this like day-to-day life about electric vehicles, right? There's people that talk about how electric vehicles, yeah, they don't use gas, but look at how bad the batteries are. Look at what it takes to actually mine the lithium that goes into the batteries. Look at all the things that come out of this. Whether that's right or wrong, what they're talking about there is embodied carbon, that the actual manufacturing of the battery itself is really bad and possibly worse than a gas car. When we're talking about construction materials, there is a lot of embodied carbon. And the reality is, when we're looking at Walters and Wolff glass, the materials that we make have a ton of embodied carbon, meaning the process by which our materials are manufactured is not environmentally friendly. And why? What is, I mean, anyone want to take a guess? What is it about glass, the way that you make glass and the way that you make aluminum, that makes it environmentally unfriendly? Does anyone want to guess?
The
How
fuel?
do you make raw glass?
Heating a giant furnace.
Yeah,
With-
Heating a giant furnace to, I think, 3,000 degrees Fahrenheit. And how do you extrude aluminum? You heat a giant furnace.
Yeah.
And till you basically turn that aluminum so soft that you can push it through a little die. Our materials require an intense amount of energy to be produced. One of the things I was reading from from a college professor that was looking at this, he said that for like triple insulated glass, which is popular sometimes, right? Because you look at the U factor for triple insulated glass, it really helps out a building. I mean, it really drops down that U factor, right? Because now it is so energy efficient that once installed, it really cuts down on energy use. The embodied carbon of producing that triple insulated light is about takes a 20-year return, meaning that piece of triple insulated glass has to be in service for 20 years in that building and being energy efficient to offset how much carbon went into making that in the first place, from how much you had to heat up the glass to melt it, all the way down to putting it into trucks and shipping it across the country to where it's going. So when you start to look at things like this, you go, shit, 20 years, that's crazy. I mean, the warranty on glass is only 10 years. I mean, after 20 years, you start looking at reskinning a building. So does it really make sense to put some of these materials in that are so environmentally unfriendly? The issue today is how do you actually get more energy efficient glass and aluminum? You design your building with less glass and aluminum. There's not a better way to do it. You would require the glass manufacturers to build more energy efficient plants, to build furnaces. You're not going to get around the fact that glass takes 3,000 degrees to melt glass. What you are going to be able to get around is building factories that are more energy efficient, that don't waste that energy, that try to recapture as much of this as possible, to use more efficient means of reaching those temperatures. There's not an incentive yet for the industry to change because they have demand for the glass as it is. And so you're not seeing that shift. The same with aluminum. Western could go and completely redo their factory to make it more efficient, to be able to lower the embodied carbon, but no one's asking for it. And until people really demand it or are willing to go someplace else, you're not going to get those changes. So there's not a lot that we can do, but it's a conversation that is happening. And we're seeing architects come to us and ask the question. Now, Our sister company, Walters and Wolff Precast, there's a lot more going on there. There's a lot of look at what aggregates go into the precast, what types of sands they're using, some that are more environmentally friendly than others, where they're coming from, how those ratios of materials are changed. And that's being led at a high level, all from that, the Concrete Institute that we're members of, or that Walters and Precast are members of. So they're working on that, but there's not as much from us. Some of the other initiatives that we have here, and the word name's escaping me here, but Frank, what's the one that has the list of certain products that just aren't allowed on a job? Was it a dead list, live list? Do you remember?
Yeah, I'm trying to remember. It was the one for Santa Monica City Hall.
Right.
They had all the PVC and they're very specific. They had a good list. Yeah, I can't remember.
Yeah, just a red list. So
Yep.
there's a couple other groups that have tried to start ranking systems and use different means and methods of looking at it. And the one that Frank had on a project, they had a list of products that were just not allowed to be used on the job. And most of it had to do with plastics. They were just trying to keep plastics off the building. So the main thing here is just be aware. When you see that your job has a LEED requirement, just be aware. There's nothing you need to do differently. You really don't even need to, I don't even think we have it as a checklist item on our checklist, because at this point, nearly all of our projects do go for a LEED ranking of some kind. The PMs just need to submit paperwork. If you're seeing anything specific in the specs though, that's where you want to watch out for. If you see specs that are calling out for 25% recycled content, that is a point to pause. And at least we want to talk to Heather and find out, okay, does Western comply with that today? Because they keep track of what they do, and they may or may not. We just want to be able to track that, because that might be something we need to qualify. But short of them asking for something very specific, there's nothing on pre-construction that you need to do. Again, we do a lot, but it's passive. It's all based upon how that building was designed. That's everything I have on this. Any questions?
I have a question.
Yeah.
So when we get our score, can it change throughout the year, or how does that work?
So usually what happens with LEED is at the very beginning of the project, the architect is going to, they've got a whole spreadsheet of all the possible points that you can get. And they, at the very start of the project, usually before we're hired, they've mapped out what points they believe they're going to get. And that some of them are a yes, some of them are just a no. They're not going to get it. So access to quality transit. The building is either close to mass transit or it isn't. If it's close, they mark that as a yes. So they go into designing the building knowing that they're going to be getting 2 points for that. You know, if the building's going up out in Folsom, they know that it's a no. They know that that's just 2 points that they're not going to be going for it. But there's a lot of points that are maybes, that they go, well, we're not sure, we'll have to see. You know, maybe we'll be able to design the building to have more bicycle facilities or not. And so they'll have maybe. So the architect is starting out at the beginning of the project with a an idea of where they are. They know how many points they have for sure. They know how many points they are not going to get. And then they've got this like pool of points in the middle that are maybes. And that'll be where they and the GC then focus on during the course of the project to see like, okay, can they get those maybes to become yeses, either through the design or through the sourcing of material, or, you know, as they finish up their thermal modeling of the building, they'll be able to see, okay, are they a yes or no? So in that regard, the points are going to change. They started out with a goal, and as the building design goes along, they're going to do it. The architect, sometimes a consultant, but at the end of the building process of getting that building built, they're going to submit to LEED, to the US Green Building Council, an application. They're going to submit an application that is going to have where they got their points from, where they didn't get their points from, and it's going to provide some backup along with it. So like when we give letters saying, here's how much recycled content I have, that's kind of included in backup. And LEED's going to review that application and they are going to say yes or no. My understanding of it is LEED does not really get into like a deep review of it. If you say that you've got enough things to like get those points, it's like, yes. I mean, it's a little like doing your taxes. Like, as long as you're generally honest, like you're fine. Like, just don't super lie and hope you don't get audited type of thing. Like, it's like that. So the points may change, but when it's finally done and approved and certified, like that's it. That's how many points they're getting.
That's kind of cool. I didn't know that.
Any other questions? All right, well, that's it. Thanks, everyone.
Thanks,
Thanks,
Vince.
Vince.
If you have any other questions about this, feel free to reach out.
Thank you.
Yeah.
Have a great Thursday.